It's the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Mike McIntyre. So glad you could join us. Cleveland has made progress in a number of areas laid out by the U.S. Justice Department when it entered into a consent decree a decade ago with the city to improve policing practices. But the federal monitor tracking the progress of those reforms has raised concerns about the disproportionate number of traffic stops of black drivers compared to other races. Black people are nearly 4 times as likely to be stopped. Does that necessarily indicate bias? The Cleveland Metropolitan School District Board of Education gave unanimous approval to the district's consolidation plan, which will result in 29 fewer schools and a number of vacated buildings. The tough work of executing the plan starts now as it will take effect in the next school year. Cuyahoga County Council members said the 2-year budget they just passed is the worst since the current form of county government was begun in 2011. Major cuts to health and human services were necessitated by rising health care costs and a reduction in federal money. And new marijuana regulations, including a ban on intoxicating hemp products, are headed to the governor for his signature. Joining me to discuss all of these stories and more from IdeaStream Public Media, education reporter Connor Morris and environment reporter Zaria Johnson. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see both of you, or good evening if we're
Good
listening
evening.
later.
It is evening right now, actually.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Also with us in Columbus, a journalist whose work product is more intoxicating than any hemp product, State House News Bureau Chief Karen Kassler. Hey, Karen.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you. It's always a happy Friday for you, right?
All Fridays are good days.
Okay, very good. All right, your comments and questions are welcome during the show. We'd love to have you join us. Just send an email to soi@ideastream.org. All right, let's get ready to roundtable. The new assessment from the Federal Monitor overseeing Cleveland's implementation of the consent decree with the U.S. Department of Justice found that police stop black drivers disproportionately more than drivers of other races, and black drivers are far more likely to be searched and arrested once stopped. In most cases, police laid out the reasons for the stop and probable causes for arrest. The city said a consultant it hired studied traffic stops last year and found no bias. But the monitor said there is cause for concern. It needs to be looked into a little bit more. City's been under the federally mandated consent decree for a decade after being found to engage in a pattern and practice of excessive force in violation of the Constitution. The goal of the decree is to improve operations and restore community trust. Sorry, let's go through first what the monitor, Christine Cole, wrote in the report. What were the findings? And I hear it's like almost 4 times as likely to be stopped. But how did she lay that out?
Yeah, so she said that black drivers are stopped nearly twice as often by police officers than you would expect based on the number of black drivers that are actually on the road. So she said black drivers make up about 62% of traffic stops, but only about 32% of drivers. And as a comparison, white drivers make up 31% of traffic stops, but about 60% of drivers. So based on these numbers, that's where we get that 3.7 times more likely. Black drivers are 3.7 times more likely, than white drivers to be stopped by Cleveland police, but they're also more likely to be searched and more likely to be arrested. The report did mention that they're oftentimes being stopped for things like speeding or excessive window tint, but police officers are also using that probable cause for arrest as a reason to stop these drivers, and that does lead to often searches and seizures of these black drivers. And there's also a handful of cases that show that the driver's ethnicity or race or gender could play a role in the officer stopping them to begin with.
Yeah, there's a small percentage, I think, that she said. But the question then becomes, if you're disproportionately stopping black drivers, is it because you're seeing black drivers and wanting to stop them because you think they might be up to no good? Or is it because the person who's driving is speeding, and whether they're white or black? And so that's what we get into to try to, and that's going to take a whole lot more analysis. Yeah. But what the city says is, we hired an independent consultant last year. By the way, they haven't released the report.
Exactly.
But they did have a press conference with this Harvard professor, I think it was in October, who said, no, I don't see any bias at all.
Yeah, and they haven't put that report out yet, so we don't have like the data to compare directly to what the monitor is saying. But they based that analysis on whether black drivers are pulled over more often and how often those cases involved any sort of like illegal contraband that might have been on the driver. But until we see those actual findings, it's hard to say who's right and who's wrong in the situation.
It's interesting, though, because the city is saying this is not any information we didn't know, but it doesn't mean what you don't jump to a conclusion based on looking at it.
Yeah, and the city has made some significant progress when it comes to different elements of its police reform. The Monitor particularly called out the search and seizure reform, saying that they've done a lot of good work in that area. There's also some trainings and in areas like use of force, crisis intervention, and officer accountability that they've made progress on. But the Monitor is basically saying that there's more work that needs to be done before the consent decree is over to make sure that we're heading in a positive direction.
And that's an interesting point because the city has been making the case now for more than a year. Hey, we should be out of this thing. It's been a decade. We did a bunch of stuff. Look at all the progress.
Yeah.
And now what we see is a new monitor, who comes in and says, yeah, you made progress here, but wait a minute, what about this?
Yeah, and I think that's the sticking point at this point. Like you mentioned, if there's this disproportionate amount of stops for Black drivers, is it a cause for concern, or is there some sort of relation to actual crime and arrest that the city needs to continue to address? So we'll have to see when we get that report from October. We'll be able to get a clearer picture of what's actually going on.
And I think the Monitor said, too, it's a broader issue. It isn't just whether or not someone sees a Black driver and stops them. There are myriad issues that are involved with why that might end up being a situation where that happens. And to me, that sounds like a long time of study, not like you're out of this consent decree in a week.
Yeah, and they've been going on about it for 10 years. Maybe it's another 10 years. Maybe it's even longer than that. We'll have to.
Don't let the city hear you say that.
Yeah, who said that? Not me. Not me.
All right. Moving along to the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. This week, the district did vote on and it voted unanimously on greenlighting a massive reorganization that will reduce the number of schools by a third. The district said the changes are needed to align its footprint with current enrollment, which has steadily declined over the last few decades. And Connor, you've been covering this. In fact, we're really not reporting anything new now because when you reported the consolidation plan, it was basically fait accompli. We just needed to then get the approval of the Board of Education. It was unanimous. Yeah. And what are we going to see now?
Sure, it's going to be, there's a lot that needs to happen. So, notices are going out to families of special education students this month. Like, where can we put you? Where do you want to go? There's specific settings that these students need to be in sometimes, like a small group room or just a solo classroom. So that's going to take a lot of planning. New bus routes. These schools that are closing are going to be merged with others. So the staff are going to go new places. Students are going to, it's an open enrollment district, but the district says, well, we'd like for you all to go to one school so that you all are with your peers, but folks can really choose where they want to go. So there's going to be so much that needs to happen. The district already has announced 24 principals at some of these closed schools are, you're not going to have your job anymore, but they say it's not a layoff, it's a displacement. You can maybe find somewhere else for you to work in the district. Might be as an assistant principal or something else like that, or a dean. And what we're really looking for coming up here is what's going to happen with teachers and other staff, because the district says we've got this whole period of enrollment where students and families can choose which schools they want to go to. That's from January to February. Once they know how many kids are going to be going to schools, then they're going to determine staffing. So in this intermediate time, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of anxiety we're hearing from folks.
There's choices then that parents and students can make, but also there's choices that teachers can make. And the union is concerned not only about lost jobs because there are fewer schools, but lost jobs because teachers are going to decide to bag it because of this?
Yeah, the teachers union president, Sherry Wrensky, told me attrition could be happening, folks moving out of the district, or, in some cases, the teachers might say, well, I don't like where the district is going to place me. I'm going to apply for a job elsewhere. I actually talked to a teacher who told me that. So that very much so could be a reality. Teachers leaving because they've been at their school for a decade or more, and they're like, well, I love it here. I really don't want to go somewhere else, so I might just take my fate into my own hands and maybe go to a different school. There are a lot of different school district. There are a lot of charters and private options as well. So there are a lot of hard choices coming. I also heard from that same teacher that some teachers with seniority who have been there for a long time, they're choosing to retire instead. They say, this is probably the time for me to do it. Change is hard. Might be a little too hard for me. Also, this might preserve some jobs for some younger, less senior teachers who might be the first to go under a union contract.
It seems like it will be awfully hard, too, for students, especially those who have been going to a school for a certain amount of time. First of all, it's just perhaps the travel.
Yeah.
Secondly, it's, if you were at Glenville and now you're going to Collinwood and the two of you are combining and you were bitter rivals.
Yeah.
There's that kind of issue, but also special ed students. And that's one thing we heard specifically from parents on the west side in the last couple of weeks is that what's the plan for special education?
There's been a lot of concern about that, and folks are arguing that the district really doesn't have a good plan for it. The district says, well, this is an evolving process, and we are going to get families to exactly where they need to be, and we're going to work with you that all through that process. And on the point of consistency, I mean, in education, consistency is really key. There are studies that suggest that transitions like this are tough for kids, especially kids with special needs who have learning disabilities or other disabilities like autism, for example. So this is going to be a challenging time for a lot of people, but the district says we need to do this. You know, if you really look at the statistics for urban education, for CMSD, these kids are really struggling. I mean, in third grade, just a third of kids are proficient in English and math on the state test. There are some issues with state testing, of course, that a lot of educators say, but and this doesn't really necessarily get better as kids get older as well. There are about half of students are chronically absent, so they're missing a lot of school. This is not just a CMSD issue, but the district is saying, look, we want to make sure that there is a lot of good programming at every single school. And right now, that's not necessarily the case. There are these college and career pathways that the district talks a lot about, and those are, where students can get prepared for a career in like medicine or the arts, and a lot of urban schools are doing this nowadays. And they're saying some of our high schools just don't have this at all, and we really want these kids to be prepared for a good future, a career or college.
That's interesting to me because one of the things they did is put a lot of eggs in these specialty school baskets.
Yes.
And if you go to that school, you're going to come out ready for a career in science or a career in the arts. But if you go to, for lack of a better word, some ordinary school, you're not going to get that. What they're doing now is it just kind of spreading the peanut butter more thinly so that everybody gets access to something?
Yeah, and the idea is that there's fewer schools, so then they can concentrate those resources a little bit more. And we've done some reporting on this as well. We looked at the records, and there are schools that they've just got the bare minimum of maybe a couple sports, maybe a couple extracurriculars. Whereas you look at your John Hayes, your John Adams, which are the highest performing schools in the district, what you would call a magnet school. And you see these across urban districts. There are some, in many cases, there are just a couple of schools that perform really well. They get the cream of the crop. Sometimes there's a lottery to get in. So it could be a little bit harder to get in. And that is where the best programming is, because they focus their resources there. They say, we've already got this great thing going on. We don't want to hurt that, And the district is saying that here as well. We're preserving these high-performing schools. They're actually moving more kids into them as well.
And then bringing other ones up.
And exactly. And the schools that remain, they're going to add new programming to them.
So one thing we do have to note is you were saying some of these schools have few programs or few sporting events. They also have few students. When you look at the district, and we took a look for the last several decades, we're talking about a huge percentage fewer students.
At Cleveland, if you look at the population of Cleveland, we've lost so many people. And this happens with a lot of, cities in Ohio. Columbus is, one of the few that's growing. But in Cleveland, the enrollment is about half what it was 2.5 decades ago in terms of the school district. And so that's a huge loss. And the district says, and some studies back this up as well, if you got fewer students, you're going to have fewer teachers. That means those teachers are not there to be a coach, to be offering, these extracurriculars or these other, programs that might make a school more desirable to go to. So it's kind of a vicious cycle is what district leaders are describing.
And we then also have the state audit that looks at it and basically says that if you have fewer students in the same number of buildings, that's not good. The state audit said you have too many buildings.
Yeah, there's a recent audit that the CEO referenced that we need to look into a little bit more. I want to take a look through it myself, but he said they told the district basically you got too many buildings and too many administrators for the number of students, and that's something we have reported on before. Cleveland does spend the most of any of the large public school districts in Ohio on administration versus students. It's about $4,080 or so per student, compared to like Columbus, it's about $500 less or so in Cincinnati. Okay. So there is a lot that they say that we need to change, and this is their big bet for changing it.
Got a question from Marvin. He says, a guest yesterday said the district uses a consultant to predict future student enrollment, but I wonder if they took into account the recent determination that this region is becoming a climate haven. Redfin even has a report that 2026 will bring a hot real estate market. It's been said a lot that Cleveland's climate's getting more temperate. It might be the place to go. We've got all the fresh water in the world. What about the prediction that, yes, we've had population decline, but maybe it could come back?
It could, but birth rates are declining significantly across the country, and they have for a while. So we are seeing the fruit of that now with fewer kids going to college, and as well enrollment declines even in Lakewood, which is a lot of folks would argue is a very desirable community, and they've actually moved to consolidate as well recently. So
Okay. David in Cleveland Heights says he wonders if there's going to be a worsening effect on our environment due to people having to travel farther to their schools. And I do wonder how the Cleveland Metropolitan School District will be able to afford the increased busing costs.
it's a fair point. In many cases, these schools, we have so many schools in Cleveland that the mergers, that these kids are only going to be going to a school that is like about a mile away or so, a mile or two away. So the district says, we are not anticipating that much increased transportation costs. They are going to be expanding transportation in the next couple of years, though, to make sure that these students are getting to their new schools. They're getting into this routine and everything. So we'll have to wait and see how much more that those transportation costs are.
Okay. Going to the state now, the legislature passed sweeping legislation that will make changes to the state's laws for recreational marijuana and intoxicating hemp. The Senate passed SB 56 this week, and it's up to the governor now to sign it. Karen, there was a little delay. The House did this a while back. The Senate came back and passed it. But let's talk about the changes first to intoxicating hemp, especially as the bill relates to beverages derived from it. Those are still good, but only for like maybe a year?
Right. And this bill, when you talk about history, goes back. I mean, the first discussions about changing the marijuana law go back to when voters approved the marijuana law in 2023. And DeWine and others had said that because it was a law, legislators should make some changes. They didn't like some of the things that were in that law that voters approved. And so now we're talking about including intoxicating hemp, which is Delta 8 THC and other things in this whole piece of legislation. So the Senate had proposed it. The House made some changes that the Senate was concerned about at one point. There was this long House session where there was a deal eventually worked out, and now the Senate has approved this. So it would ban all hemp-based items with more than 0.4 milligrams of total THC. So if that means
all of
something
them.
to you.
Yeah, I mean, all of them. There's nothing that has that low of a number.
Yeah, but it also, I think the big thing here is that it does put some regulations on those THC beverages, which have become very popular. They're sold at convenience stores and bars and things like that. And this is very similar to something that was put into the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, I think. Maybe it was, no, it was the shutdown. That's what that is. It was some regulations that were put into that deal that ended the federal government shutdown, that it kind of mimics what that bill does in terms of allowing those THC beverages to be legal, at least for the next year. But there's some room to move here, I guess, according to some lawmakers who say that if the federal law changes, then the state law can change as well.
Let's talk about changes for the actual marijuana, legal marijuana laws. One, communities will get some of the tax money from that, something they've been waiting on that for a while.
That's a big deal. About $80 million that the state has been holding on to from the revenue that's been collected since marijuana sales started. It can actually be distributed to communities that have dispensaries. And communities have been calling for this for a long time. So that's a big deal here. And the other reason it's a big deal is because this does allow, because it's an appropriation, it allows Governor Mike DeWine to potentially issue some line item vetoes. So that's what we're going to be looking at. I spoke with him yesterday for our year-end interview for our TV show, The State of Ohio, and he mentioned that he's going to sign this law, but he didn't say if he was going to line item veto any elements of it. So the overall law he likes, but there are certain things in here that he may not, and he may put his opinion on that.
And finally, Democrats are not happy with the changes to this recreational marijuana law. They say it could recriminalize possession.
Yeah, and Democrats in both chambers were concerned about this because there are some things in here like it makes it a crime to store edibles outside of their original packaging. So if you put it in another container, that would be bad. Or if you're bringing in marijuana from another state into Ohio. So they're concerned about some of the things that they say that this does that kind of recriminalizes things that voters had already said that they wanted to overturn. And that's been the whole discussion all along does this bill protect kids, which is what Republicans have said, and put some needed regulations on marijuana and intoxicating hemp, or does it go against the will of the voters, which is what most Democrats have been saying?
Okay, one more question. There's a separate decision by a Joint Committee on Agency Rule Review now limits how dispensaries can advertise. That also brought some criticism. You can advertise alcohol.
Right. And that was the whole point of the 2023 amendment. It was titled essentially the way to regulate marijuana like alcohol. And so you see beer advertisements and wine advertisements all the time. But this is the Joint Committee on Agency Rule Review, which is a panel that looks into stuff like this. They banned advertising on billboards, radio, television, the internet, and stadiums. And there's some questions about whether this is constitutional or not. And it does really push back on what that 2023 ballot issue did say.
All right. We'll look at all of that as we continue coverage. Also, we're going to take a quick break right now. We'll talk about the state's plan to take from the pot of unclaimed funds for the Brown Stadium, which a judge refused to block last week, actually this week. And I'm also going to share with you some of the reaction we got from our Conversation Begin today's show about stopping black drivers in Cleveland. This is the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable. I'm Mike McIntyre, and we'll be right back. And welcome back to the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Mike McIntyre, joined this week by Zaria Johnson and Connor Morris of IdeaStream. And State House News Bureau Chief Karen Kassler is with us from Columbus. You can try the IdeaStream News Quiz as soon as we're done here. It tests your knowledge of the stories from the last week. You'll find it at ideastream.org/quiz. And before we get on with our next topic, I want to share some of the feedback from our topic that we began the show with on Cleveland police stopping black drivers more often than those of other races. First, Catherine says, why does nobody bring up the point that the company that Cleveland used for their determination that there's no bias, this is the study we talked about last year, was the same organization that had done major studies finding no bias in policing nationwide. It seems to me they chose a company that was predisposed to finding the police not guilty of any racism. That's Catherine's point of view. We also have John, who says, I don't know about Cleveland, but I can tell you that the night I was at Brattonall Mayor's Court in a waiting room with well over 100 people, all but one was black, and that one person was me. Does that mean that black drivers are so much worse drivers, or that there are other reasonable bases for hauling them into court, or could they not buy their way out of a court appearance, or is there bias? That's John's point of view. Tom says, remember, drowning deaths correlate with ice cream sales, but ice cream does not cause drowning deaths. Cause and correlation, Tom is talking about. And finally, Stephen says, does it constitute bias? I think it depends on all the metrics of the stops. If there's no other statistic that stands out to explain all the stops as a whole, then the 3.7 times more likely statistic starts to look pretty suspect. Really appreciate your feedback, so keep it coming at soi@ideastream.org. And moving on to our next topic now, Cuyahoga County passed a 2-year, $2 billion budget this week that includes significant cuts to social service programs. Some members described it as the worst budget since this form of government began in 2011. Connor, let's talk about what some of those cuts are.
Yeah, they said they've been working on this for months, and obviously they didn't want to have to do this, but it's about $40 million in cuts, $8.5 million over 2 years from the Alcohol, Drug Addiction, and Mental Health Services Board. One of those acronym names that you see a lot, ADAM.
Adams, yeah.
H's, yeah.
Yep.
And that oversees, of course, mental health and addiction recovery spending, and then about $16 million over 2 years from the county's Division of Children and Family Services as well, and this will likely impact services for homeless folks and social services in general for families and children.
So this was submitted by the county executive, Chris Ronayne, and when he submitted that leaner budget, he put it on what? The reason it has to be slimmer.
Yeah, the costs of everything have increased in recent years, but he said, rising healthcare costs and reductions in funding from the federal government were kind of the two main things that he really pinned this on.
Council largely followed the budget submitted by the county executive. There were a few changes, though. What were some of those?
Yeah, it looks like they kept most of them in place, but they did notably return $4.5 million in a subsidy for Metro Health, which is the county's publicly funded hospital system. And the council president Dale Miller said, we recognize they're facing a lot of significant headwinds right now and uncertainty, and they're facing cuts themselves, at the federal level as well.
One of the council members who voted against this budget was not because he thought he didn't want to see these cuts. He said, we need to tighten the belt even more.
Yeah, Councilman Michael Gallagher was the one vote against the budget, and he said it prioritizes non-essential services rather than focusing on services that the county should be required to provide. He specifically said that they should reduce its subsidies for nonprofit service providers, but he also felt like the budget didn't really accurately represent the amount that they'd end up spending overall. The budget doesn't include the $1 billion-ish for the new jail or the cost of the new courthouse. And Ronayne did add $4.6 million to the sheriff's budget, but the sheriff's office already said that they're expecting to need more money to cover its overtime expenses. So Gallagher basically is saying that this budget is presented to be effectively balanced, but he's not so sure that it actually is.
And there are other obligations that are coming. I mean, like you mentioned the sheriffs, but there are other things that could be put into this that would make it even less balanced.
Yeah, he mentioned that he's at least concerned about some settlement payments they might have to make. There's a few outstanding jail death settlements along with a couple others that are still in the works, I guess you could say.
Sure.
So those are just other additions that might have to come out of the budget down the line.
And you mentioned jail, they're building one,
Right.
$1 billion. This doesn't necessarily come from your operating budget, but there's the obligations that are coming up that are big ticket money
Yeah.
items. Yeah. All right, and we had Brian sent us an email, Karen. I think he gets us. He gets our sense of humor. He wanted to know if you just said about the marijuana rule that it was done by the Joint Committee.
Nice. That's actually the name of it, but I get where you're
He
coming
said,
from.
did I actually hear that? You did, Brian. You heard it. All right, this week a judge weighed in on a legal challenge to the state's plan to use $600 million in unclaimed funds to help fund construction of a new Brown Stadium in Brook Park. A lawsuit challenging the funding mechanism is working its way through the courts. A judge denied an appeal to block the plan while the case is going on. Karen, the decision is essentially a win for the Haslam Sports Group, but it's not necessarily game over.
Well, and that's what Mark Dan, who is one of the two attorneys who has filed the lawsuit trying to stop the unclaimed funds from being used for the Brown Stadium, said. And when I talked to him after this, because this was there's a case that's going on whether it is constitutional for the state to use that unclaimed funds, which Dan and his other counterpart in this, Jeffrey Crossman, they're both Democratic former state lawmakers. Dan, of course, is the former Attorney General of Ohio as well. They've said that it's unconstitutional for the state to take money that they don't own and basically use it in this way. And the state has said that this is something that they have the right to do. And so this case ended up before a federal judge who was solely supposed to decide whether that transfer could go forward on January 1st. And he did. Federal Judge Edmund Sargas ruled that on January 1st, the state can start transferring between $1.7 and $1.9 billion in unclaimed funds held before 2016 over into this fund that will be used to pay that $600 million for the Brown Stadium.
If no one claimed the funds, what would happen to them anyway? Do they just stay there in perpetuity?
Pretty much. And that's been the argument, I think, that this money's there. It's not earning interest, and so it can be used in other ways. Other states do use unclaimed funds in different ways, but the argument that Dan and Crossman have been making is that this is money that the state is not entitled to because they're only holding it for the rightful owners of this money till they claim it. But a lot of people don't claim that money. They don't know it's there. The claiming process is very difficult in some cases. You have to prove all sorts of relationships if you're trying to claim for somebody else, or it can be very difficult.
And it can be really little amounts of money. It adds up
yeah.
to a lot. But if, for you, it's $15 or something. If you put a bunch of those together, we're talking about building a stadium.
Well, and there are some people who have much higher numbers in that unclaimed funds thing. And one of the things that the judges said that it was the reason that kind of suggested why he is allowing this transfer to go forward is that people can still claim that money, even people with claims that go back before 2016 until 2037, I think, 2036. And so there's still that opportunity for people who have that money in there and legally can claim it to still get their money back.
All right. And the lawsuit, though, about whether it's constitutional, that has not been decided. This was just
Right.
the short term. Can they start withdrawing on January 1st? If they prevail in the lawsuit, the people that are against this, you would assume that that has to go back in.
Right. And that was one of the things that Dan said. It was kind of a mixed ruling for him because, yes, the transfer can go forward starting on January 1st. They've actually gone, I think, and filed another attempt to try to stop that transfer in a different court. But he said the case continues. And that's been their argument all along, is that they want to establish the constitutionality of whether the state can do this or not.
And the judges, or the unclaimed money we've talked about the Browns, the $600 million for the Browns, but it's not just the Browns. This is a cultural and sports facility performance grant fund. So there are a number of other teams that are also looking at this because I think at some point they're going to want a piece of the pie.
Right. And if you remember earlier in the year when we were talking about the budget, Governor DeWine had proposed this idea of taking money from sports gambling and kind of putting it toward a sports facilities fund and increasing the tax on sports gambling. Lawmakers didn't want that. And so they kind of came up with this idea on unclaimed funds. And yes, this could be used for Bengals Stadium and anybody else who may be coming forward. And certainly there have been some rumblings of other groups coming forward. The question, of course, now is whether cultural facilities can be a part of that. And do they have to go through the same process, or are there different rules for, something that's related to the arts versus something that is related to sports?
Jack.
And I should state that it was made very clear in the federal court that this is not the Brown Stadium, according to the state. It is a transformational multi-use facility.
Oh,
So
got it.
there you
Okay.
go.
And it's covered. Jacqueline sent us an email. She says, I think those unclaimed funds, since it came from taxpayers, should be used for our social net programs that are being cut. Why couldn't we use them for homeless housing or feeding children or child care subsidies? There are many better uses than to subsidize this. That's Jacqueline's point of view. All right. Moving along, the Bibb administration and the county executive are pushing for the closure of Burke Lakefront Airport, reasoning the 400-plus acres of lakefront property could transform the city if it's redeveloped. And it looks like the Haslam Sports Group, after fighting to leave the lakefront, is willing to help the city get rid of Burke. So, Connor, reporting this week pointed to the Haslams being an ally in this case.
It seems like a bit of a concession. I mean, there was that agreement struck between the city and the Haslams earlier this year, where, of course, they're moving forward with their, covered stadium near Cleveland Hopkins, but they agreed to give the city $100 million to demolish the current, lakefront stadium,
And for other uses.
and to prepare for future development. So it looks like this might be part of that. And some of this reporting from Cleveland.com, a couple sources inside City Hall said that there's nothing like exactly defined yet on what's going to happen, but the Haslams are using their connections. So they've obviously donated to many Republicans before, and they're using some of these connections with these folks to say, hey, what can we do here? What can we get for this?
Right, and Cleveland, with a Democratic mayor, who's the head of the Democratic Mayors Association, probably doesn't have an in with a whole lot of these Republican legislators. So maybe that's where the Haslams come in. They've got connections, they've made donations, they have relationships, and so they can maybe get meetings and open the door.
Yes, exactly. And, we'll see what kind of that ends up looking like.
And it's not just with lawmakers, but also with the administration, with Sean Duffy, the transportation secretary. You would think he's somebody you could probably pick up and call. I can't, but maybe Jimmy Haslam can.
Yeah, Haslam name dropped him specifically during a press conference with Bibb. Like he obviously clear enough. He knows him well enough to text him or call him. So yeah.
And what about broadly the lakefront development? I know the city had put out requests for people to say proposals for what this could be, and I think we're getting pretty close to finding out who they might choose and what plans might be employed.
Yes, there's been some discussion at the Cleveland Planning Commission level recently. So efforts to identify a developer or team of developers to partner on developing like 50 acres at the stadium site. The selection is expected within a few weeks, I suppose, for that area. And some work could even begin before the stadium's even demolished, as some of this reporting, which could occur as early as 2029.
Okay.
But Burke will be further down the line.
All right. Let's move on to e-check, which everyone loves to talk about and everyone loves to go do. Yeah. Every 2 years, cars between 4 and 25 years old must be inspected at an e-check station to make sure they're not polluting the atmosphere. Ohio lawmakers want to scrap e-check, but the U.S. EPA this week dealt a blow to their plans. Karen, scrapping e-check was part of the new 2-year budget?
Yeah, and Republicans in particular have wanted to get rid of e-check for a long time. They say it's outdated, it's costly, it's a burden for drivers, and isn't necessary because of cleaner cars and better air quality. But the U.S. EPA has really pushed back on that. And there's actually evidence that shows that over the 30 years or so that it's been in place, that it has reduced pollutants in the 7 counties that were at one point covered with e-check. And so the state now is saying that it would save the state $13 million a year by not having e-check to be performed. And this easy e-check ease program, I believe the alternative now, allowing you to just go forward and say that you have an alternative basically form that says that your vehicle meets emission standards, that would save the state money.
Yeah, because I would know.
Right.
Maybe we need a rebrand of the e-check, like an easy e-check. You know,
Easy
we
E.
get
Oh,
easy
yeah,
to come
you're
in.
onto
You know,
something.
there's a
Just
song
turn
about
the volume up while you pull in. It was set up in the 90s. Zara, you cover environment. Why was e-check put in place in the first place?
Yeah, it was essentially to help the region get a handle, get control over its poor ozone quality. And like Karen mentioned, it's reduced like hundreds of tons of nitrogen oxides, volatile organic compounds, tens of thousands of tons of carbon monoxide since it's been in place. And it's worth mentioning that here in Cleveland, the city's Division of Air Quality has been doing their Clean and CLE initiative, Clean and CLE initiative, I should say, where they have these air quality monitors up around the city to better pinpoint the city's air pollution and sources of that air pollution. But at the same time, they've, I think in January, put out a revision on the city's air quality codes in an attempt to put more stringent measures on local industry and businesses to improve and reduce air quality emissions. But at the same time, a part of that work is to make air quality better overall so that we don't have to do the e-check. So local officials are at least thinking about ways to improve our local emissions to get the e-check off the table for residents, but it sounds like more work remains to be done.
Yeah, I've had some experience with this because I have a car that my daughter now drives, a 2009 car, and I brought it in. It didn't pass, and really, though, the rules are, first you can get a waiver, so you can still continue polluting, apparently, for a while. But then if you spend a certain amount of money on repairs and it still doesn't solve the problem, you spent that money and then you can get approved. It's not like they scrap the car.
Oh, well, that's great to know because my grandma's going through the exact same thing right now. She spent money to get a new part and she's still struggling.
That's
so.
how I read it anyway. Ending e-check would save the state money, wouldn't it, Karen?
Yeah, like I said, about $13 million.
Okay.
So that money specifically going to Envirotest Systems, which is the contractor that operates the program. So basically getting the form would save that money. But, you know, it's one of those things, too, that it's been pointed out that this was something that was specifically for Northeast Ohio. When I moved here to Columbus from Cleveland, it was like, oh, I don't have to do e-check anymore. And that's been an argument that if really it's necessary, why isn't it necessary for everybody, especially if it's been cleaning the air to the point where it's no longer that necessary. But
Right.
we'll have to see what happens.
Okay. Nurses at Metro Health's Behavioral Health Hospital told Cuyahoga County Council members in a public hearing that there is an urgent need for safety reforms. The nurses voted in the spring to join the Ohio Nurses Association. And Zaria, when they say safety reforms, they're saying they don't feel safe.
Yeah, so members of the association are basically saying that they need better workplace protections, they need more staff, they need safer patient placement protocols in the hospital system, and enforceable safety measures to better protect employees. And essentially they're saying that they've been reporting being placed in dangerous situations while on the job.
With patients
With
who have
patients.
behavioral health issues.
Exactly, being physically assaulted by patients, even instances where nonviolent patients are placed in the same rooms as violent patients, and patients are being woken up out of their sleep and being assaulted by their roommates, or even when nurses have to come in to treat a either violent or nonviolent patient in these rooms, being in some sort of altercation with that patient. So essentially, they're calling for action, better protection to feel safer at work while they're working.
And there's a crisis nationwide with violence against healthcare workers.
Yeah, it's I think nearly 65% of direct care nurses in Ohio have reported some sort of workplace violence. I think that was in 2023. An ONA survey found that percentage. But nationally, nurses are assaulted about twice an hour and totaled about 17,000 assaults in 2023. And that's according to a separate report from the Press Ganey company. And then even last month at the Wexner Medical Center in Columbus, there was a nurse who was strangled by a patient. So we're seeing this at national, local, state levels. But yeah, it's a there's a trend at least.
And how has the hospital responded?
Yeah, so a hospital spokesperson has said that they're committed to providing a safe environment for their employees. They also say that they have this comprehensive sort of layered safety policy in place to both enforce protection and prevent cases like this from happening in the future. And this also, they say, includes some sort of intervention, both in the moment and a post-incident review of what's actually going on.
Okay. Here's some bad news. The holiday lighting displays are up around the region, but if you love the lights at Nela Park, formerly owned by General Electric, you'll have to do some driving to see them. For a century, GE Lighting dazzled the public with its Christmas and holiday decorations at the Nela Park headquarters. Last year, the 100th was the last for the full display in East Cleveland. Connor, you're not going to be able to drive there and be awed by this. However, there is a little bit of a silver lining. Some of those displays are elsewhere in the county.
Yeah, they've been placed throughout the county. And I didn't know that Nela Park was the first industrial park in the world. Actually, as I was looking into this, I thought that very interesting. But yeah, they've been donated to a variety of nonprofit and other communities. Public Square, Which Park and Playhouse Square, Western Reserve Historical Society, Boys and Girls Clubs, Cleveland's Parks and Recs departments received some donations as well. You might be able to see the zoo, Ohio City.
So I wonder if somebody should put together like a little
Like a map?
a little route,
quick
like a
Google
treasure
Maps
hunt.
thing.
Yeah.
And you can get the experience, but you're going to get it with like a tank of gas.
Emissions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And exactly.
More emissions, yeah.
I will take my car.
Yeah,
Not my
please.
daughter's car. And there is some decoration at Nela Park too. Still.
Yes, they've left some there, and then further out, there's been some in Euclid and Highland Hills. So some other folks, some other places out in the county as well.
Yeah, replica of the National Christmas Tree in Washington, D.C. is still at Nela Park. So that would be one of the stops on the little map that I'm absolutely not going to be putting together.
We're gonna make you do that work
It's another
specifically.
one, of my,
own.
another one of my great ideas that I'll never do. All right, we're going to take a quick break right now. That's a great idea. And then we're going to have more news, including a big weekend for pickleball in Cleveland and the return of pickleball in Rocky River if the players can behave themselves. This is the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable. I'm Mike McIntyre, and we'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Mike McIntyre. Zaria Johnson is here as well, and Connor Morris. Karen Kassler is joining us from Columbus. Major League Baseball this week approved the sale of the minor league Akron Rubber Ducks baseball team to Prospector Baseball Group. Ken Babby, the principal and founder of Fast Forward Sports Group, has owned the team since 2012 and oversaw its rebranding from the old Akron Arrows to the Rubber Ducks. He recently became CEO of the Tampa Bay Rays, so now we have new owners. Who are they, Zaria?
Yeah, so Prospector Baseball Group is owned by, or led by John Abamondi, who's a longtime sports executive, and Ben Boyer, who's a tech entrepreneur. The group also acquired the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp through this deal. They're an affiliate of the Miami Marlins, which is another team that Babby owned previously. So these are the new leads.
I love minor league baseball team names. The Jumbo Shrimp,
They're
the Rubber
fun.
Ducks.
They're fun.
There's all of them.
There needs to be a team named the Feral Cats in a city that has a particular problem with feral cats.
Yeah, maybe Akron. I've got a couple from Akron, so think about
Akron,
it.
Yeah.
Babby, who was the previous owner, is excited about this new ownership group.
Yeah, he said that they put a lot of thought into picking this company to own the team, and he said that he's confident in the ability that John and Ben will have to be worthy, passionate leaders of the team at this point.
Yeah, and he was given a lot of credit too. Babby was by the city for, revitalizing the team. It's really cool to go to Canal Park, but it's also affordable. It's a great attraction. It's not just for Akronites. I mean, if you paid the money to go to a Guardians game, and it's well worth it, but a lot.
Yeah.
You'll certainly save a lot and have a great experience at something like a game with the Rubber Ducks.
That's good to know. I only go to our one Guardians game a year here at IdeaStream, so maybe I'll have to check out the Rubber Ducks.
I
next
think
season.
actually Anna Huntsman set up a Rubber Ducks visit last year for the group, and I missed it. I think you
I
must
missed
have too.
it.
So
Sorry,
we'll do it
Anna.
next time.
Thanks, girl.
Karen, the Ducks are known as a quality minor league club, as the AA affiliate of the Guardians, and a key part of their talent pipeline. I know you pay attention to the Clippers, the AAA affiliate, but you get a lot of Clippers from Ducks.
Absolutely. I mean, minor league baseball is the best way to see talent as it's coming up through the system, and also people who are on rehab. I mean, Gavin Williams, Bo Naylor, Stephen Kwan have all been at Akron, as well as Chase DeLauder, Petey Halpin, Austin Peterson. We've seen some of these names that have gone on and done really well, Travis Pisano. And I just have to add, minor league baseball, you're absolutely right, has some of the best names out there. The Trash Pandas, the Yard Goats, the Flying Squirrels, and also the Isotope Isotopes. So shout out to Simpsons fans out there, the Albuquerque Isotopes. So Columbus Clippers just sounds kind of
Yeah.
kind of boring compared to some of these names.
And I've got a hat of the Mahoning Valley Scrappers. They're
Nice.
another great team.
Nice.
Let's talk. Maybe this will someday become a minor league sport, but pickleball is enjoying a surge in popularity nationwide. This weekend, Pickle in the Land is underway at the Huntington Convention Center, bringing together 700 players. Organizers say will be the Midwest premier tournament. And this year, the Cleveland Pickleball Center, the city's first dedicated indoor pickleball facility, opened in the Bel Air Puritas neighborhood. So it's all about pickleball. And I think we talked about this on the program back when it happened. But in Rocky River, pickleball was canceled because people couldn't behave themselves. And, you've seen people like argue, it was in, it was out.
Yeah.
Apparently, something happened there. They scrapped it. Now it's back in Rocky River. New rules were put in place to make sure that people behave. Zaria, people could once drop in to play pickleball. That's been changed in Rocky River.
Yes, exactly. And it's because of these behavioral concerns presented by these altercations. And it's worth mentioning that these were adults that were kind of getting into it, not kids.
Yeah, come on, people.
Yeah, let's be grown up about this. Let's be mature. So like you mentioned, Mike, they'd be disagreeing about points or whether something was in or out or whatever the case may be. And it got too heated from the center's perspective. So now people can't drop in anymore. They have to register ahead of time. There are only 20 spots per session available to people who want to come in, and players must also pay an additional program fee in addition to any sort of membership or admission fees they've already paid. Okay. The center is saying that they're hoping that this makes everyone feel very safe and welcome when they come to play pickleball. So, let's be positive and happy when we go in.
And
maybe
I'm sitting here going, come on, people. But I think anybody who played basketball with me in the mornings at the Lakewood Y would be like, wait a minute, you're the guy saying that?
I'm sure you traumatized some people out there.
I mean, I was okay, but I got it. I got fouled. They're like, no, you didn't. And then that becomes a whole thing. Karen, have you ever played pickleball?
I have, and I'm not very good at it. I'll just fess up right now.
Any of you guys?
I think people should just play tennis.
Yeah.
It's a real
That's
sport.
harder.
Pickleball is
Pickleball's a real
exactly.
sport.
It's a real.
I know that Judge John Russo in Cuyahoga County is a huge pickleball fan. Told me once that he went to Florida, like some people go for golf trips. Mm-hmm. He went for a pickleball tournament trip. So I'm assuming that he's over at the convention center right now.
I'll have you know, I was the co-captain of the tennis team in high school.
Wow.
Just my senior year though.
Wow.
And I think people need to just get the full court. You get a little more exercise. It's a little bit bigger. Just play tennis.
I cleared the fence every time I hit a tennis ball, and I don't think that's the point.
It's not a home run. You don't want a home run.
Well, speaking of home runs, Paul Hoynes has covered a lot of home runs in his career as a baseball writer for the Cleveland Plain Dealer and Cleveland.com. And now he's headed to Cooperstown in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. He's going to be inducted as the Baseball Writers Association of America's Platinum Pen Award. He's getting that, formerly called the Career Excellence Award. So not inducted, but he's getting this major award that one writer gets every year. It's the highest honor for a baseball writer. And I'm a buddy of Hoynes's. Congratulations to him. And Karen, I know you've been following his work for basically your whole life.
Oh, absolutely. But the stats, as compiled by super producer Lee Barr, he is the 77th winner of the award, fourth from the Cleveland market. The honor is presented annually for meritorious contributions to baseball writing. And I think that really kind of sums up what he's done really, really well. He did well in terms of finishing above others in this whole category. So congratulations to him. It's a great honor.
Yeah, and I got to cover for the Plain Dealer the World Series in 95 and 97. My job was to write the front page story. Hoynesy was writing the sports stories. This guy is hilarious. If you are covering that many games in a year, at one point he's typing, and he turns to Bud Shaw, and we're in Florida, and he says, that body of water over there, is it a lake or an ocean? And Bud says it's an ocean. And then Paul looks down at his computer, and he looks back at Bud, and without even having to hear the question, Bud says, Atlantic.
That's hilarious.
That's what it takes when you are covering baseball and traveling the entire
Coming
world.
from the Midwest.
Yeah.
He is the
He's
best.
used to the big lake.
Right.
Yep, and inside joke, but a hawk call to you, Paul Hoynes. Appreciate all the work that you've done, and really an excellent honor. Definitely well-deserved.